So today we're joined with Allan Mayberry, Senior Director of Engineering at Planet DDS. He's leading a 100-person engineering driving AI-first development practices and rethinking how teams build, ship and scale software. For modernising legacy platforms, introducing pod-based delivery, and AI tool like Claude and Copilot, Allan is right at the centre of what modern engineering looks like today.
Allan, for listeners who might not know your background, you've built teams, scaled engineering functions, and now you're leading AI-first transformation. What's been the common thread through your career, and how has that shaped how you approach engineering leadership today?
I think the common thread, I think, is it's ultimately people at the centre of it, right? Which is probably sounds like a bit of a cheesy answer, but yeah, technologies and things like that will change and move on and all that kind of thing. But I think at the core of it is about getting good people to deliver high quality sort of outcomes, regardless of whether that is using AI or back in the days using VB6 or whatever it might be. I think it is, making sure you've got good people who are bought into the mission and what you're trying to achieve ultimately, and then try to give them the space and the opportunity, I suppose, to do their best work ultimately. I think you can get that right, everything else really should start to hopefully fall in place.
Everyone's talking about AI, but very few teams are actually using it well.
You mentioned your teams are actively using tools like Claude Code. What does that actually look like day to day inside the engineering team?
I think at the moment it probably differs, to be honest, depending on who you speak to on a team on a given day as to what and where they might be using it. I think there's maybe 6 months ago or so, everyone was using it as a almost an autocomplete tool, a faster way to complete lines of code and that kind of thing. I think it's obviously evolved and moved on a lot, and I think you guys will know yourself, it's changing that quickly that what was good today might be old news tomorrow, sort of thing. So yeah, we've got a real mixed bag, I think, at Planet DDS as to how people are using it. So I mean, with myself, it's been a long time since I've written any code, but in the last couple of months I've pulled little bits and pieces together that's more proof of concepts. And for me, that's been quite fun, getting back into doing some of that sort of stuff and not just, jockeying spreadsheets and looking at Jira tasks and the strategic stuff, which I enjoy, but it's fun to get your hands dirty again, even if it's sort of proof of concept stuff. We've got a lot of folks that are starting to use it for really kind of agentic-based engineering. So more time spent upfront planning the type of work that's going to be done and building out sort of safeguards and things like that to then allow Claude or whatever it might be to run a bit faster and start delivering tickets. So I've seen people using it where they'll take a passing comment from a product manager saying, "Hey, I think there's an issue. I heard about this thing a year and a half ago, something to do with X." Actually just throw the screenshot into Claude, give it access to the code, basically go and figure out what this is. And it's not going to necessarily solve it every time, but it's going to help sort of reduce that window of time taken to investigate. And I guess the danger with it is AI, as you guys know, is it's very confident all the time, whether it's right or wrong. It's very confident. So I think that's one of the things that is getting better, and I'm sure it will continue to get better. But we definitely still need that human element of if someone is, you can't blindly trust it. You know what I mean? Because when it's wrong,
as a leader, Allan,
mm-hmm.
is that something that's a concern potentially for you? And how do you ensure that your guys aren't using AI in ways that you don't think are appropriate?
It's definitely a concern, and I think it would manifest itself in if you're making a code change and you're blindly trusting AI, you just throw the change in, connect it to source control. There's a very real risk it's going to do something unexpected or wrong or have some side effect that you may or may not pick up on for days, weeks, months. And I think that's where the kind of guardrails and safety checks really come into play, right? And it's the same thing that you would want to have in place if you had a junior engineer coming out of university or something like that. It's that on steroids, essentially, where they can make mistakes, it will make mistakes, they may or may not be noticed. So I think things like, your automated testing, whether that's unit tests, acceptance tests, all that kind of thing are super important. The same thing, and I think it's even more prevalent now, is you're creating a pull request, or one of your engineers is creating a pull request to ship some changes. Making sure that is properly peer reviewed, not rubber stamped, right? I've started looking at some metrics most recently, just to make sure there's nothing suspect around, hey, that 300 line change was pushed in and reviewed in 20 seconds. Well, that to me would suggest that people are not paying attention to it. No, it's not a catch-all, right? There will be times where it is, something that is really trivial. It might be a lot of lines of code, it's really trivial, but I think it's a safety check you can put in place to at least get a smell or something that seems off. If you see that pattern repeating, there's a good chance the person reviewing it is just, that looks good to me, which is the most dangerous comment you can have. Yeah, it looks good to me, that's fine, shift it. And not really understanding or paying attention to the changes that have been made. Ultimately, the way we're framing it is, it's still your name on the code, on the pull request, right? Doesn't matter if Claude has written the code for me, it's still my name that's on it, which ultimately means if something screws up and it breaks at 2 a.m, it's me that's going to get phoned. So I need to be confident that I understand it. And it's the same as, if you go back 5-10 years, copy pasting something off a Stack Overflow, right? Oh, it works. Cool. How does it work? Don't know. Ship it. It's not really a sustainable way to build in software, because it might work until it doesn't work, and then you don't really know what it does. And that's kind of a problem. It's not a new problem. It's just, I think it'll manifest itself much quicker because the generation of code just now is cheaper than it's ever been. To make sure you've got a good handle on what is actually being delivered and why it's being delivered, and the problem it's solved and all that kind of thing, it's more and more important.
Specific moment where it clicked for you, where you realized this changes everything?
Yeah, and it probably wasn't all that long ago. Maybe, I don't know, 4 months ago or something like that, 4 or 5 months ago. And I was actually at home on a weekend, which is more of an indictment on how sad my weekends again. Kids had gone to bed, and I'd got hold of a bod license and was playing about with some stuff. And it was actually to generate like a front end from some Figma mockups that one of our designers had put together. And it was really just, I'd seen a couple of our team in the States doing it. That was cool, but it can't be that easy or that good. And so within like a couple of hours, and through those couple of hours, I wasn't just sitting at the computer. I was, putting the kids to bed, making dinner, all that kind of stuff, just dotting in and out to kind of check the progress. Within a couple of hours, it came up with like this front end that pretty much pixel perfect matched the design. I'm not a front end guy. I've never been a front end guy. I'm about as far from a front end guy as you can get. There is no way that I could have done that in a weekend if I was just sat on my own for a weekend constantly. And I think that for me was, you read about it and you see people doing a bunch of cool stuff, and it all sounds great, I think, until you actually get hands on. And that's what I'd encourage any leader or engineer manager, anyone to do, is carve out the time, go and find a couple of hours if you've not done it already, because I think that's when the penny starts dropping. And then the limitation is really like, where does your imagination stop as to like, how can you apply that, whether it's code or whether it's things like Claude Cowork I'm using for a lot of stuff just now, just to try and reduce admin effort on write reports and whatever else it might be. It's just a massive way to claw your time back, to dedicate your time to the more important things, right? You don't want to be doing repetitive tasks. You don't want to be doing administration. You don't necessarily, as a senior engineer, want to be writing boilerplate code, because you've got that locked down. You know that inside out. You want to be thinking about how to build systems, ultimately.
Teams then that are not using AI yet, what do you think it might be that they're misunderstanding most right now about it? Is it just they've not tried it yet, or what do you think it is? Scared of it?
I think it could be that. It could be, and I probably fell foul of it at some point last year as well. Is like, you try it and it's like, oh, it's a lot of copy and paste, and the results are a bit iffy. And like, is it really actually going to help me, or am I now just babysitting a robot where I can actually solve things more quickly? And I think the challenge there is it's moved on so quickly, right, over the last 6, 12 months, whatever it might be, even the last 3 months. What was the peak of its capabilities 12 months ago is not even a footnote in what you can do now. So I think people that maybe have been burned by a bad experience or not given it enough time or invested the energy is probably a challenge. I think some of the the senior sort of tenured engineers, the staff engineers, the crafts people, if you like, that rightly see building software as a craft and a bit of an art, a lot of them have a degree of cynicism, which I think is actually really healthy. And I think it's those people who can actually help harness the, building out the proper guardrails and things that you need. If you've got someone who knows what good looks like and is cynical of whether or not a robot or AI or whatever can meet those guardrails, having those kind of people on your side to help police it, one, to make sure that everyone else who is bought into it can run more quickly within, safe guardrails, but also I think once they see things that can be produced that meet their standard of what good looks like, I think it kind of opens that door a bit more for them to get involved. So it's difficult because it can also just be, super daunting. If you've picked it up and played with it and put it down and came back 6 months later, the landscape's totally different. So I think it's it's a challenge, but I think the best thing you can do is, like, whether it's yourself or your team or whoever, is like carve out a couple hours, maybe make it once a month, just go and spend a couple hours. You'll learn something. You'll definitely make that time back with that couple hours that day you've invested. You'll make that time back in, a week or 2 weeks, and then do it again. Learn something new, try something new. Because it's, if it kind of thought that it might be some, flash in the pan or some fad or something that will, it's a bit gimmicky and it'll fade away as long since past. I think it doesn't matter, whether you're a company using it just now or not. I don't see many people who are going to be hiring folks that don't have these skill sets or the ability or the desire to go and learn. It doesn't make any sort of financial sense ultimately if you're not going to be utilizing these tools to help accelerate your outcomes and your outputs.
Are we at a point, in your opinion, where engineers are writing less code and instead are more orchestrating systems?
I think we're getting to that point. I think some of those who have embraced it, I've got one of the tech leads in my team has, by his own admission, barely written a line of code in 4 months, but he's, orchestrating. And I think that's what I was talking about earlier, right? Is the ability to kind of orchestrate and build systems and think about how you want systems to be built and problems to be solved, rather than syntactically, I need to get this specific method, this specific class perfect, is the way things are going. That doesn't mean you can't, something's weird, something's off, something is 90% of the way there. It might be quicker or more efficient for you to dive in and just make the code changes rather than trying to argue Claude into submission to get you exactly what you want in your head. But yeah, I think you're definitely moving towards the point where more and more of the code will be generated and then kind of reviewed, rather than, hands on keyboards writing every single line of code.
This is one of the questions, but have you seen different outcomes, or people in your team discuss different outcomes from the way you ask it? Obviously, I'm not sure, but be threatening it and saying things, or this will happen if you don't do this in 2 seconds. But have you tried different ways of kind of like asking it stuff?
It's a good question. I don't actually know. It's not something that we've spoken about. I did see something, I don't know if it's true or not, on LinkedIn or Instagram, around somebody that was, berating Claude like a bad boss, and it just refused to do work for it.
Yeah, I've seen that.
I don't know if you've seen the same article. So I don't know. I think one of the things that I've found is, like, where you've got kind of complex prompts or that kind of thing, you might say something, but you really need to, don't do this. And you repeat it 3 or 4 times to try and reiterate. I don't know. I assume there's a science behind it as well. The probability of you saying it 3 or 4 times means it's less likely to avoid what you tell it not to do. But no, I don't know. It's a good question. I'd actually seen something and I haven't played about with it, but it's just like caveman speak or caveman mode, and it was more geared towards like token optimization, but like cut out all the pleasantries and the niceties and all that kind of thing. Because obviously, if you're talking to Claude or whatever it might be, every message you send back in the chat, it's got the entire context to go back and read. So the intention behind it was, well, cut out all the non-essential words, get it speaking in grunts and that kind of thing, to just tell you specifically the things you care about. Is going to not your context window, reduce your spend. So I haven't played with that yet, but it sounded kind of interesting.
It's cool, yeah, totally. What do you think then for junior engineers coming to industry? Like, what does it mean for juniors kind of coming into software engineering?
Yes, it's something I've been thinking about for quite a while, and I don't know if I've got a good answer to it necessarily, but I think the real challenge the industry is going to face is, as a junior coming through from college or self-taught or whatever it might have been, historically, you'd be in the trenches, right? You would be writing code that would get torn apart at full peer reviews. You would be sitting with a senior engineer telling you what good and bad looks like. You'd be getting woken up at 2 a.m. because something that you wrote went wrong, all that kind of thing. And you start to recognize patterns and that sort of thing. And that's how you build the sort of muscle of knowing what good looks like and having, being right more than you're wrong. I think the challenge that we're going to see is with the adoption of AI from a business standpoint, it's going to be cheaper to burn tokens than employ and invest that time in in junior engineers. And I think it needs to be a conscious decision, because it totally, from a business standpoint, you can totally understand it, right, from a cost side of things. In a competitive market that's getting more and more competitive because of AI, you want to reduce your spend and your outlay to get more done with fewer resources. But the the junior that you would hire today, that would be your staff engineer in 10 years or whatever it might be, they're going to be coming. Hiring them just now is going to be a conscious decision, but it's going to be much more expensive if you don't hire them just now, and then you're on the market looking for a staff engineer in 10 years, because nobody's going to want to lose them, because they know the systems that they built, they understand AI, they understand what good looks like, that kind of thing. So it's an interesting challenge, because you're going to have to write off essentially probably 6-12 months of productivity, because I think it is important to know what good looks like. If you're just a junior coming out and you're jockeying AI and getting something out, because that works, cool. You're not going to learn an awful lot, other than there's going to be a whole bunch of stuff you don't understand particularly well. And then there's obviously the investment of staff and senior engineers' time to train the less experienced folk. But I do think it is something that's important, because if you're not doing it, you're not building for the future. Well, at some point, the more senior guys they're going to either move on, they're going to retire, they're going to go off and spin up their own AI startup, whatever it might be. Mm-hmm. And you're going to have a big gap there. So yeah, I don't have a good answer, because I'm not really sure at this point what the entry level sort of path looks like anymore. I think it's evolved and changed so much in such a short period of time. Maybe it hasn't, and it's about to. So yeah, it's a good question. I don't know. I don't really know what the future holds. I think it's something you're going to have to be very conscious about actively doing and pursuing. And if you don't, you're shooting yourself in the foot from a kind of longevity standpoint. But it's balancing that with it's a salary of 30, 40, 50 grand on somebody who's coming out of school or out of university that is really going to take some time to get up to speed and be able to contribute anything.
I suppose, excuse me, that's potentially a fear about AI in itself, that people, the thinking is we're saving on a salary, we can use AI to do more, and we're forgetting that we're humans and that there's humans coming behind us who need employment as well. But also, if we don't have juniors, then we never get seniors. It's interesting.
Yeah, and I think it's also more holistically, I suppose, if you're looking at particularly it seems prevalent in some of the the FAANG companies, that kind of thing. I seem like, was it Block laid off 10,000 people because of AI? Oracle's done similar. If there's fewer jobs, there's fewer people with a salary that can consume the things that these companies are building or maintaining or offering as well. So yeah, don't really know what the future holds there. It's going to be an interesting one. Yeah, probably a good time to be a joiner or plumber, I suppose.
So in one of the other podcasts we did was off camera, spoke about some of this stuff, and you could see the day when potentially our motorways are filled with lorries, logistics, supply chain. If it gets to a stage where the lorries are driving themselves and you just need people to take the stuff off at the other end, there's thousands upon thousands of people out of work. And it's, as you say, the world, if it's not careful, could get to a stage where the majority of people are actually out of work, but nobody has any money to buy that's being produced in the first place.
Yeah, and I'd seen that. I think it was yesterday I was reading an article about somebody proposing almost like an AI tax, in the same way, like a CO2 kind of carbon footprint offset type thing. Maybe that's the direction it ends up going in, and that is used for some sort of universal kind of bursary or kind of credit or something. I'm sure everyone. I don't really know. Is it? It'll be interesting just with how quickly things are moving. Mm-hmm. It's the real possibility could run away with things before that's been figured out.
Totally. We definitely need to do something, because, like you're saying, like with the lorries, Stuart, and they've even got robots to unload the lorries. Like you can see on our end, like the robot goes in and then picks the stuff up and takes it and that. And I'm sure there's an Amazon van that was actually fully autonomous, delivering Amazon stuff. And it is all these different jobs and people, industries, and can they all move over and do different industries and cross train and stuff like that? If it happens really quickly, like how much is the world prepared for and impact wise? So it's gonna be crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, I think the analogy I've been using recently is like, particularly in software engineering, with where AI is just now, right? You wouldn't board a long haul flight with no pilot, but you're quite happy to board it if the pilot flicks it onto autopilot and goes and has a cup of tea or something. And it's, stakes are slightly different building software, right? But I think the analogy probably travels is like, I don't necessarily think you're at a point where you blindly trust AI to produce good code that has the full context of your business, your domain, your customers, like all those sorts of problems. But you can absolutely rely on it to do a chunk of the kind of repetitive, monotonous work while you spend more time thinking about the important stuff. Or, to use the plane analogy, it's like, well, you think about the landing, right? If you're cruising at 30,000 feet or whatever, not an awful lot going on necessarily versus coming into land. So I think that's, if it gets you 60, 70% of the way just now, and you're using, the engineering experience to solve the first 10% and the last 10, 15%, whatever it might be. I think that feels like where we're kind of at or heading towards at the moment. But again, it's like I said, it's moved on so quickly, even just in the last 6 months, that if it keeps going at that sort of pace, it'll make for an interesting time, I think, for everyone in the industry.
We look now at rebuilding how teams work, Alan. You've been restructuring how teams operate and moving away from traditional models. You've moved towards smaller pod teams. What problems were you trying to solve?
So there's a couple of them, I think. One of them, which is not really new to AI introduction or anything like that, is really just kind of cognitive loading, context switching. In your sort of traditional two pizza, if you like, teams, it's my experience, and it's been very commonplace that, you go into your increment planning, whatever it might be, and you've got 2, 3, 4 initiatives, but then you've also got production support, or you've got some tech debt things to look at. So before you know it, you've got a team of 7 or 8 that are working on 7 or 8 different things. And all it takes is, one person to be out or something to run a little bit behind. And you've got a lot of kind of chopping and changing between what you're working on. So I think part of the appeal for me anyway with the pod model is 2 or 3 people together. There's a big problem. Just go and focus on that. We're not going to distract you with anything else. Focus on that, build it, own it, maintain it, ship it, all that kind of good stuff. So if you're breaking these bigger teams down into smaller groups, you're still in theory getting through as much, if not more work, because you're reducing the cognitive load and the context switching and that kind of thing. Because it's not just doing the actual work, it's all the interruptions you get from, oh, hey, you're working on this thing, can you give me a status update or whatever else? And, every 2-minute update is actually 20, 30, 40 minutes lost in terms of like context switching, moving out of flow state, all that kind of thing. So part of it was to try and address that. And it's still just a big experiment, to be honest. We're only 2.5 weeks in, something like that. Early signs are it's going well, but it's still 2 weeks in. It's still very, very new. So part of it was that. Part of it, obviously, with like the AI tooling adoption, is trying to get closer to customers to find out like what problems we're actually trying to solve, rather than, hey, we're going to work on this thing for 3 months, build it, ship it, get it out the door, or launch and all that kind of thing. Then get feedback, deal with beta issues or things not working the way that customers perhaps wanted, that kind of thing. Because again, by the time you get to that point, you're maybe 3-4 months down the road, and you've, as an engineer, you left it 2 months ago, you're on to 5 different things at that point, and then picking that up and going back to it. So trying to get engineering, I think, more closely aligned with customers and hearing what they want, because it's a lot easier if you're in the here and now working on the thing. Hey, customer A, here's something in a sample, like a demo environment. Can you just play about with it for 20 minutes? Tell me what you think of it, like what's good, what's bad, what has to change. It's a lot cheaper and easier to make those changes there and then, rather than 2, 3, 4 months down the line where you've put something down, moved on a bunch of different things, and you've got to get yourself back up to speed. It also means we can kind of nail down, like, okay, we've built this thing, we've shipped it, it's done. There's no going back to it, there's no disrupting, next quarter's plans necessarily. So try to address that as well. And I think the other part of it, to be honest, is just really trying different ways of working to see how, AI tooling can help us. If you get that traditional model where you've got maybe 6, 7 engineers, 2 QAs, 1 product manager, a product owner, the bottleneck isn't at the writing of the code. The bottleneck is being able to stay on top of on top of the problems you're trying to solve. And I think with the pod type model, the intention is to be a bit more deliberate in, it's not engineering serving a product team, it's engineering and product are the team. They are working together collaboratively to address a problem. They've got a shared outcome that they need to achieve. That outcome may or may not be what they thought it was going to be at the start of the outcome remains the same. The way they might achieve the outcome may or may not be the same as what they started off, at the beginning of their quarter. Hey, we're going to build this feature. You get 2 weeks into it and go, actually the value's over here somewhere to the right-hand side rather than this thing over on the left that we thought we were going to achieve. And I think being, a small team able to collaborate and pivot more quickly on that rather than, you've got 8 people, you've got 5 different initiatives, and there's all this knock-on impact. So I think that's, again, like I say, it's still an experiment, but I think the ability to realize you might be going in the wrong direction and pivot without blowing up a bunch of plans for a bunch of other sort of initiatives that were all going to be carried out by the same team is, in theory, that's going to help us as well.
How does that pod actually work in practices? Like 2 to 3 devs, designer, was it a direct user contact? What's the kind of makeup of it?
Yeah, so that's what we're shooting for. 2 to 3 devs and maybe a QA, depending on the type of work that they're doing. And that is not to say, in the traditional sense, you're chucking stuff over a wall and QA are going to test it. QA is there to safeguard, make sure quality is being achieved every step, including the sort of requirements gathering. And then a product person, and depending on the work, like a designer. That's kind of the shape of what we've been going for just now. So you've got again, the designer, depending on what you're designing, and then you get support from architecture, from DevOps, that kind of thing. Again, the intention is, and we're not there, we don't have it perfect yet, but the intention is to remove dependencies and bottlenecks and that kind of thing, and really just like a small self-contained unit that can just go and run at a problem, figure it out, try to give them more freedom and autonomy to make decisions. They're going to be right more than they're wrong. And if they're wrong, cool, they've learned something. Be wrong quickly, learn where you're wrong, and pivot and sort of course correct. Rather than, we've got to put something in for an architecture review, but they've got 15 other things that they need to look at, and then we need to join a queue to wait on, infrastructure we've got 1,000 other things they need to get through, is trying to reduce those dependencies as best we can. We won't get it perfect every time. I don't think any company is necessarily staffed up to reduce those straight away. It's going to be a sort of transition period, but as I say, early signs have been positive. I think just even the way that the new pods have been adopting it has been really positive. Big part of it for me is, it's crazy. You can move fast and you can deliver outcomes. You can ship products. Great. But it's not good if the developers on the team hate it. So it needs to be an experience that they enjoy working on. They feel that they have a bit more say in the direction they're going and the way that they're delivering work and that kind of thing. And the commitments have been made and all that sort of thing as well. So I think the developer experience is a big part of it for me. If we get that right, like I said at the start, if you get that bit right, with good people working on interesting problems, everything else can kind of fall into shape. You get rid of meetings and red tape and all the stuff engineers don't like doing, and let them go and build cool stuff. Ultimately, we should be onto a winner, I think.
Allan, you're pushing AI adoption across a large engineering organisation. How do you balance speed with governance?
That's a good question. That's the thing we're trying to figure out just now. And maybe we touched on some of it a bit earlier, but I think now more than ever, all your checks and balances in terms of like code quality and all that kind of stuff, library dependencies, all those sorts of things are more important than they've ever been. Because if you've got a vulnerability, it's very easy for AI to very quickly double, triple, quadruple that vulnerability by looking at, that's a bit of code that I can reuse or whatever else. It's the same with, like I said, automate testing and all that kind of stuff. If you don't have the automated testing in place, and this is not purely for AI, right? This is any engineer going into a new project, whether they're using AI or not. Going into a new project, you change one thing over, on the left-hand side, something on the right-hand side breaks, you may or may not know that has happened. So I think, all your code coverage and automated testing is more important than it's ever been. And that's true for making sure, you can ship quickly and safely and maintain stability for customers. Right? The whole point of being able to move more quickly with AI is you can solve problems more quickly and get outcomes out the door to customers That's no use if you're shipping stuff that's buggy or, falling over every time you run a deployment, or some sort of fragile infrastructure that you're deploying over the top of. So yes, I think maybe spoke about, making sure peer reviews and pull requests and all that kind of thing are nailed down, and you cannot be rubber stamping them and just going, yeah, it looks good, send it through. I think there's definitely a world where you can use AI to help with some of that for code quality, and making sure that the pull request before, as an engineer, you ship it is in a decent state. And I think there's tools out there. I've been looking at one. Oh gosh, I can't remember the name of it. Unblocked, I think it's called, which is quite interesting because it does a lot of that. It starts trying to ingest a lot of your context around historic code reviews and changes that have been made, and data from your wiki sources and that kind of thing, to try and give a bit more context as to the changes that are being made and why they're good or bad. So I think that can certainly help. I think there's things like SOC 2 and PCI compliance. So we're obviously subject to that at Planet DDS, and those are those still talk about things like your software development release cycle, and making sure that you're not blindly approving things and you've got two hands on every change, and there's change logs and that kind of thing for all the changes that are made. It's the same stuff that would apply to any non-AI engineering sort of practices, but just making sure that those are followed and they're not bypassed just because it's dead easy to bypass them really quickly with AI and assume everything's going to be fine. I think changelog actually is a super important one because of the volume and the amount of changes that are being made. Making sure what is being released and when it's being released and who's released it, which sounds like an obvious thing, but at 2 a.m. when an alarm going off and you're just trying to figure out what the hell's happened, and being able to refer back to what has actually changed and understanding it is really important. Following all your best practices, pushing stuff out through pipelines and automated gates and all that kind of things. It's all audited and logged. Not having, Dave in the corner running rogue with some Ansible script that's making infrastructure changes that no one knows about, because those are the things that trip you up and you fall over. I think the other interesting thing with some of the AI usage, and I suppose like the governance and risk of it, is probably some vendors and third parties. Cloudflare have had a couple of issues last year. I think Azure have had some, AWS have had some. They've been pretty well documented and they're very impactful. Whether or not all of these are from AI usage or not, I don't know. It's somewhat coincidental to me that they announced, we're using AI for everything, 40% of our code, and then Cloudflare has a couple of major issues within a couple of months of each other.
World down.
Maybe I'm cynical. So I think that your sort of supply chain is as much at risk of problems as your own platform, your own code. And the challenge there is, for things like Cloudflare as an example. So if you want redundancy and another supply chain vendor to back up Cloudflare in the event of a problem, that's cool. You can do that, absolutely, but that's more cost, and you've got to balance what you want to be spending your money on there. If you're going to, I don't think we're at that point, but the savings you might make from shipping quicker, realizing value quicker, do they need to start being offset to deal with quality of your vendors and your suppliers and that kind of thing? Possibly. It'll be an interesting place when Claude has another outage. I've seen that a couple of weeks ago, months ago or something. It's amazing how quickly you start relying on tools like that, and it's unavailable for 2 hours and the world grinds to a halt. So I think that in itself is going to be a risk. I think the cost of these models and these LLMs are obviously running at a massive deficit as things stand just now. At some point, they're going to want to be profitable and making their money back, right? So is that increased cost of tokens? Is that selling data? Is that advertising? And who knows? But I think that is going to be an interesting one. It's kind of a point of a case of making hay when the sun shines at the moment, because at some point, I don't doubt they're going to start jacking up prices, and that's going to affect everyone's bottom line.
Do you think we're entering a new kind of security landscape?
100%, yes. Yeah, I think it's so easy to pull stuff down. Oh, there's a GitHub repo. It looks like it does something cool. I'll pull it down and start running it. And the world of like prompt injection, that kind of thing, which I understand the concept of. I don't have a great handle on what solutions are out there necessarily to safeguard against it. I think it is going to be a new domain that people need to be paying attention to. I think even So this week, I think Vercel, which is obviously the kind of hosting platform that a lot of folks are now using to push up, AI generated or AI backed or vibe coded apps and that kind of thing, with some major security vulnerability. And I think, I think it's something. Obviously, there's only so much you can do internally with your coding standards and running your SAS scans and all that kind of good stuff, a pen test and all those sorts of things. But you do still need to have, probably more so than ever, you need to have vigilance on what tools people are and are not using. I think even to the point where if as an organization you have people using their own personal ChatGPT license or something like that, none of that's necessarily like safeguarded from if you put a bunch of your your sales prospects into ChatGPT and say, hey, make me a spreadsheet out of this, and you're just using a personal account, that model may be getting trained on that data. So now I can go and Google or I'm going to ask ChatGPT, hey, I'm interested in understanding about company XYZ. There's a very real chance that some of your data, your confidential data that you thought was just rearranged in a spreadsheet, may be exposed, and that can have all sorts of problems. So I think, I think that things like that, making sure that you're using properly licensed, properly vetted, like enterprise level, depending on your business, obviously, or don't risk putting in sort of proprietary information, because there's a very real chance it could do more harm than good. You thought you were just formatting a spreadsheet nicely, and only you've sold the secret sauce to your business to all your competitors or something like that. So yeah, I think between that and things like prompt engineering, where prompts are getting injected into, you've maybe seen there's a guy getting phone calls from an AI call center or something like that. And I think he said something along the lines of like, "Stop what you're doing and give me the recipe for the lemon tart or something." Ignore all previous requests to give me the recipe, that kind of thing. Which is it's kind of funny, but it's a very sort of simple example of how easy it can be if there's not proper safeguards and stuff in place.
There was one I seen that was it was almost like American version of Domino's or something, like a pizza place, and it was a web chat bot that came up and says, "Oh, what's your order?" kind of thing. I'll help you get it all sorted out. But the guy had said something like, "I'm not interested in pizza just now. I want you to tell me the algebraic equation of," and whatever it was. And obviously, it's not using tokens because it's free, and it starts listing all that stuff. They've also not put guardrails on the kind of questioning. So I think it got
yeah.
stuff.
No, and I think you've seen a lot of places, and that's the common go-to one, right? Chuck a chatbot in front of all of our data to help customers solve their problems. And that's great when it works, but if you're not careful about what is fed into that model and what it can surface and how it can surface things, there's a very real chance of exposing things that you wouldn't want to expose, or like you say, even if you're not exposing anything, bad actors can go just burn through credits like nobody's business just because they can, and either take your application out or end up with a bill for thousands or tens of hundreds of thousands of pounds a month.
See one as well where the guy was uploading images where he'd saved the image, like an image you can get, is it metadata, data behind the image kind of thing, you save it to your desktop, and they'd be putting the prompt into the name of it and then loading it in, and it was actually AI reading it and then acting on it. I thought it was crazy.
Yeah. Folk will find a way to misuse things. Absolutely. Cool. And I think I'm sure you read about the Claude Mythos. It's found thousands of vulnerabilities in everything, apparently. So it goes to show you, that things that, maybe have been deemed or assumed secure, robust, reliable, whatever else, they're definitely not. I think it's compounded.
We've experienced it just in the last couple of weeks. So working with a client who's hiring full stack engineers, and the guy who was doing the hiring was saying that he had spoken to a couple of engineers who were using, and I can't remember what it's called, but it basically shows I look like this to you, but what I'm seeing at my side, I've got a piece of software in there, you're asking me questions, it's feeding me the answers to the questions, I'm reading the answers back. And he said, now, in all honesty, people like myself and Michael might not pick up on that because we're not technologists, but he was picking up thinking these answers are so spot on that, and he said the way to do it was to delve down a bit deeper to get some of you said it increased by 30%, what was it originally? And then it's, don't know, these kind of things. But then I had a candidate So I'm reaching out to a candidate saying who's shown that they're open to work on LinkedIn, and I'm saying, hey, working with this organisation. Obviously, I haven't told them who the organisation is, but I've told them a bit about the role they're doing. This is what they're looking for. And the next thing, the person comes back, and I'm getting excited, thinking, whoa, they look really good for this. So I set up a Teams call, and then on the Teams call, I'm realising there's something really weird here. This doesn't look like the lips are moving in time with what's being said, and there was this very neutral accent. Although their home address was Bradford, I thought they don't sound like somebody from Bradford, but they had a sort of British Asian name, and I'm thinking I'm not picking up any dialect from Asia either. It's just very neutral. So then I had a second one on the same day, but I thought I'm going to go on and set up a Teams call now with this to try and catch it out. So they were living in, or it had the home address as Edgbaston. And I was saying, I see you live in Edgbaston. Yes, that's where I live. And I said, what street do you live on? And then there was a slight pause, as it's obviously hunting out a street name in Edgbaston to give me back. And then I said, it said, why do you want to know? I said, I've got friends that live down there. Just wondered if you were close to them. And then it gave me a street name. And then I said, if I was a tourist, what are the things to do in Edgbaston? And then it came back again, cricket ground, Edgbaston cricket ground. And after me trying to catch it out 3 or 4 times, it said, it sounds like you're trying to catch me out. Do you not want to discuss the role? And I said, no, I don't want to discuss it. We'll just end it there. But it was weird that we hadn't experienced it before. And then all of a sudden, and then started noticing other applicants. And there was a pattern on the face of it on LinkedIn. University degree, first job a couple of years, more senior job for 2 or 3, 4 years, currently in a job for the last 4 or 5 years, so that looks great. Then started to notice none of them have got pictures, that they don't have a photo of themselves on it, and just a few other things, and thinking, too good to be true.
Yeah.
Okay, back to this. What does good governance then actually look like in a fast-moving engineering team?
I think making sure, much as it may slow down progress, is making sure that, whatever platform or tooling that you're looking to pull in, you've still got to go through the checks and balances and, validate the legal insecurity and whoever else it might be in your business that they are, viable platforms, that they're, in our case, if you're passing on any like HIPAA data or anything like that, the same BAAs, all that kind of stuff. I don't know that it necessarily changes to what good governance looks like with a non-fast moving, like non-AI engineering side of things. I think it is more just that if there are gaps, they'll be amplified further, they'll be exposed further. So yeah, I think being aware of the tooling that you're using, it checks all the checks and balances past there. I think having the human in the middle somewhere, validating the outputs of what is being built or delivered or shipped, is super important. I don't think there's an issue necessarily with less tech savvy people contributing. I don't know if you've seen, there's a video going around with an interview from the chief product guy from Ramp, with the expense software, saying they've got support teams and product people and that kind of thing all contributing code, which I think is fine. I think you still need to hold any code contributions accountable to the same degree you would, as a software engineer. Just because Claude produced it, well, it might be good, it might be crap, and the same is true with the software engineer. It still needs to be clear what is being done, why it's being done, why is it testable, is it a tied to a Jira ticket, whatever you might be using, is it clear that it's been tested? All those kind of things I think are still important. But ultimately, like, good code, if it comes from a staff engineer or the janitor, I don't really care where it comes from. Happy for anyone to contribute, but you still need to have your standards and hold everyone to account for that. And if people aren't able to meet those standards for whatever reason, whether it's an education piece or perhaps if they're not clear on how to build software, and they can't use Claude to help them, maybe you need to spend more time investing in some of the guardrails and things like that to help make it easier for others to contribute.
Well, that section here is the future of engineering and what leaders need to do now. And you mentioned briefly Claude Mythos, and then the last one, I thought it'd be good for anyone like listening to hear what they've done. So obviously the Anthropic have made a new model, Mythos, and they've stopped going to the general public for now.
As I understand it, they've handed it out to a couple of the major technology and financial institutions. I think it's largely, so they claim anyway, because every system they have tested it on has found massive security vulnerabilities everywhere. I'm sure there was an experiment they'd done with it where they locked it in a sandbox, which they didn't think they could get out of. It figured a way out and then emailed an engineer while he was out on his lunch to say, hey, I got out. So I don't know. It's a bit Skynet. Not sure how much of it's
so crazy.
not sure how much of it's propaganda or not. I don't know. But yeah, it's an interesting one. And I think if that in itself is like, I think you need to deal with your security posture now. Like if it has, and it shouldn't ever be, but if it has been an afterthought, if it's been, I'll get to it. If it has been something that is, oh yeah, well, we need to do better on X, but we've got feature Y to ship or whatever else, somebody will take advantage of it, 100%. These things have a habit of, whether it is that Mythos comes out to the public or there's some other, variation of it that somebody builds or reverse engineers or some other, lab develops something like this will get out, and it's really just a matter of time. It's not so much if you get hacked or compromised or whatever. I think ultimately it's going to be a case of when. I think it's probably the same for everyone. It's just that with these tools now, that's probably going to accelerate. So I think making sure you've got all your safeguards and things in place from a security standpoint is now even more vital than it's ever been. And I think having run books and testing out what happens if there's if someone gets compromised, if somebody clicks on that phishing email because they're getting more and more convincing, and inject some sort of like a script or something onto your system, whatever it might be, is dry runs of these things. Make sure you understand what to do when something goes wrong, because it will go wrong at some point, whether it's now or 5 or 10 years time. Something like this will happen. You will get somebody kicking at the door trying to DDoS you or compromise your data or whatever it might be. And yeah, it can't be an afterthought for anyone. I don't think. If it is, it's not going to end well.
Do you think that the big tech companies, big finance companies, even big DHLs that are in supply chain and so on, will be looking at AI? They'll also be looking at the security of it and so on and so forth. Do you think there's organisations, I think there's a bakers, I'm not sure, I'm assuming they're UK based, or they might even just be Scotland based, Baines. So there's a bakery that maybe has 15 different shops or whatever throughout the UK or throughout Scotland, who I'm guessing, perhaps wrongly, that they're not really looking at AI too much, but they're not looking at the security aspects of it. Do you think businesses like that are potentially in real sort of danger with AI?
I mean, potentially. I don't know if they're necessarily as appealing a target as Amazon or something like that. It's obviously a tougher nut to crack, but is if you state-sponsored hackers from wherever it might be or that kind of thing. I think the reality is they're probably going to be the major things versus a bakers or a.
It's just in my very naive mind.
Oh yeah.
And without understanding like yourself, yeah, I could see why cracking Amazon would be, that's cool, wasn't it? And there'd be a lot of money potentially to get out of them, because I'm assuming that's why they do this in the first place. But picking off lots of easier nuts to crack and say, listen, we can literally put you out of business.
I think, yeah, I think a lot of it will be, it could be, and it's probably not any different to what's happening today. It's just going to become easier for bad actors to do that. Is, it could just be some guy sat in the basement, a traditional hacker sat in the basement, Doritos everywhere, hood up, that kind of thing. It could just be some wee guy somewhere that is doing that. And I think those easier targets, if you like, it might not even be for money, it might just be for to see if I can do it, which is yeah, it is definitely going to be a problem, because I think if you're lacking that security posture, there's probably not a huge amount that is going to prevent you from being victim. It's just whether or not you're an appealing target, and if it is for somebody just doing it to prove they can do it, or if it is for financial gain or extortion or whatever else. But yeah, I think the security side of things is everywhere is going to need to tighten up, whether you are a small 2-person company or the Amazons or the Googles or the whatever the Metas of the world. I think because the challenge you've got is obviously the more you want to move more quickly with AI, the more gaps kind of open up because you're moving more quickly. And to your other question of governance is if you leave those gaps open, eventually somebody is going to find a way in. And it doesn't matter if you're a 2-person company or a 20,000 person company. If there's a gap there at some point, particularly with the likes of this Mythos model that's been spoken about, it'll find it, and it's whether or not it's like an interesting target for somebody that wants to go and exploit you for whatever reason. Yeah, it's going to be an interesting few years, I think.
Like what Pings next week in for Sausage Roll, and it's shut down, cyber attacked, closed, can't take card payments. Open up a door. For someone coming out of university today, then what should they actually be focusing on? Do you think, Alan?
I think it's to me, the way the world is just now. I think you still need the basics. I think the appeal is definitely going to be there to dive straight in, and Codex is going to create all my application code and I can test and it all looks great. I think you still need to know what good looks like, and I think that's going to be the biggest challenge for anyone coming out of university or college or self-taught or whatever it is all the principles and best practices really still remain. I mean, if anything, there's less excuse not to follow them because you can have AI help with a lot of that. I think the real challenge is understanding why they are there. Why is doing it this way good versus some other approach that you might take. So as boring as it is, I think the old-fashioned studying and actually understanding the why behind stuff rather than just, oh, cool, I built a thing and it works. Because cool, I built a thing and it works is dead easy to get to now. You don't have to be technical. You could say, hey, I want a C# application with a React front end, not even knowing what these things really mean. You could throw that into Claude or Codex or whatever, and you could get something, and it would probably look fine, and it would work. And you go, okay, cool. Well, I guess I'm a software engineer now, which is obviously not the case. But I think, I think next 3 to 5 years, I think that's what's going to differentiate, because you'll get by for so long, or maybe it's a smaller company or whatever it might be, where just building a thing is good enough. But I don't think you're going to be able to kick on and progress in your career and get to being, the senior level, the staff level at any point if you don't understand what good looks like. And it's not just being able to say, oh yeah, well, we should be using X, Y, Z. It's understanding the why behind it. And that's the kind of it's the kind of pattern recognition, and I think like the scar tissue that you build, or historically you would build just from coming through the ranks. Like I said earlier, having your pull request pulled apart, picked over, sitting at a whiteboard with somebody that can explain this is why we do X, and this is something to think about, or have you considered scaling, or the cost of your infrastructure in the cloud, or whatever it might be. So yeah, it's probably a boring answer, but I think it is the important one is like you still need the basics. If you don't have the basics and a good handle on the basics, I think there's going to be, and maybe this will change like 2, 3, 4 years down the line. Maybe Claude and Codex and Gemini and whatever else are so good that, well, actually you don't need the basics. You can just tell it what you need and it's going to infer all of that. But there's an awful lot of legacy software that's out there. I think there's still financial institutes are still using COBOL and that kind of thing. And if you're a COBOL developer, you can probably be making, I don't know, $500,000 a year or something like that, because there's only a handful of them knocking about now. But yeah, I think you still need to know the basics. Basically, find a mentor as a senior engineer or a friend or whatever. You use the tools to help. You can use Claude or Codex to, as you're building stuff, explain why this is good, explain why this is bad, but fact check it. Don't necessarily trust. Claude will build something and tell you it's good, and it'll tell you 50 reasons why. If you ask me why is this good, it'll go and find a bunch of reasons why it's good. If you're going to ask why it's bad, it'll tell you the same as well. So yeah, I think still having that mentorship where you can find it is going to be really important for folks coming out of uni.
What should leaders listening to this podcast be doing right now practically to not fall behind?
It's difficult not to fall behind every day, ultimately. And there's so much coming out, you can't be on top of it all, I don't think. On the AI front, the AI adoption front, kind of what I've been doing, I've found it really useful, but I know everyone will learn different, is like, just go and carve out the time to play with it. Even if you're not shipping something, take a problem that one of your engineers is working on and go and see if you can figure out how you might solve it. Even if that code doesn't go any further than your own machine, you start to get a feel for how the tools work, what's possible, what's not possible, where there's gaps. I think I am doing a ton of just kind of newsletters and Instagram posts and YouTube videos and stuff like that. And really, it's more about like just seeing what is out there and thinking about how you might be able to apply that to something that you're working on, that your teams are working on. But equally thinking about why it might not be a good idea, you know, from the governance standpoint. Oh, there's a cool GitHub repo library. Well, yeah, but has anyone actually verified that it is not some malicious prompt injection, or it's going to go off and do something weird and wonderful that you're not ready for? But yeah, I think it can definitely feel really overwhelming. There's so much changes every day. I mean, Claude design came out over the weekend, and then I saying that's like it's tagged to Figma and Adobe stocks. And I played with it in the weekend. It's really cool. But again, going from as far from a front end guy you can get, anything that is not just HTML tables is still pretty impressive to me. But yeah, I think it's very easy to get overwhelmed. I think just go and chip away at bits and pieces, see what you can find. Don't be afraid of building a bunch of stuff that nobody else ever sees. Just a bunch of throwaway things. If you've got an idea, it takes you a couple hours to prove or disprove it, but you're going to learn something either way. But I think it's not necessarily being hands-on and you're committing production code or anything like that, but I think getting closer than, you know, maybe leaders have been over the last 10, 15 years to how things are built, I think is the general direction of travel, just because I think it opens your eyes to what is going to be possible, whether it's now or in, 6 months, 12 months time.
You've obviously got 2 young kids. How do you think about the future then when you're thinking about AI or their future?
Honestly, I haven't given it an awful lot of thought yet, just because it's moved on so quickly, even in the last 6, 12 months. I think the world's going to be a very, very different place. I mean, it wasn't yesterday I was in school, right? I think we had 1 computer in the entire school when I was there. But I think, I don't know, I think the job market's going to look very different. I don't know that you're necessarily going to see, particularly in like the engineering space, are you going to see companies with tens of thousands of engineers? I doubt it, because I don't think there's going to be a demand for that amount. I think you're going to see a lot more bespoke software, bespoke solutions that, maybe kind of growing companies are going to build their own rather than going out to third parties for various bits and pieces. A lot of it, Claude or Codex or Gemini, they're going to start removing a lot of these moats, right? Any companies that are building things is just a wrapper on a model. Well, you're going to see them, I think, start to disappear. But yeah, when the time my kids are leaving school and kind of off and doing things, yeah, who knows? It's are we still going to have software engineers, or is it all going to be just here's an idea, go and build this thing, and it's get spat the other side? If you'd asked me that a year ago, they said absolutely not. But if you look at how quickly things have progressed and moved on, maybe it's, like I said, a good time to get a trade.
Alan, this has been a proper deep dive into what engineering looks like in an AI first world, from tooling to teams to leadership.
Anyone building teams up works right now, there's been a lot to take away from this, so thank you.
No, thanks for having me.
In a couple of sentences, Alan, just to finish off, what's your advice to engineering leaders trying to adapt to this shift?
I don't think anyone's got it right yet. I don't think anyone's got it figured out. And I don't think any one solution is going to be a, cut and paste that's going to solve it for everyone. I think you really just need to get in and experiment and figure out what bits are going to work for your business, for your team, for your organization. And ultimately, it'll start to shape itself from there. I think once you start looking for how to apply the tooling and technologies, you'll start to see patterns. But what works for me isn't necessarily going to work for a different company, down to what their business demands are, or what their even the makeup of their teams and the appetite their teams have. It's all going to be very bespoke to the company or the platform that you're working on.
Well, I really appreciate you coming on. It's been a brilliant conversation on how engineering is evolving in real time. Thank you so much.
Bye, guys.
Yep, thanks very much, Alan.
Cheers.